Morgan Taylor, a successful executive, faces years of dismissal from her husband's affluent Caldwell family, who label her the family embarrassment for prioritizing her career. Unbeknownst to them, she's a key figure at Vertex Digital. When her sister-in-law, Melanie, unaware of Morgan's role, applies for a job at Vertex, a tense interview reveals Morgan's true stature. This sparks a cascade of confrontations, apologies, and revelations, challenging the Caldwell's rigid hierarchy. As family dynamics shift, will Morgan's newfound recognition reshape their relationships, or will old patterns persist? The unfolding drama promises unexpected alliances and transformations. If Morgan's journey resonated with you, hit that subscribe button. Your support fuels more compelling stories like this. Share where you're tuning in from in the comments, and don't miss tomorrow's special update. Another twist awaits. Join our community to stay connected and inspired. Thank you. The words from Melanie's text message lingered on my phone screen like a fresh wound, sharp and impossible to ignore. My sister-in-law's words, quoting my mother-in-law Eleanor, cut deep. "You're not coming to the family photo shoot on Sunday. Typical Morgan, always the family embarrassment. I guess some of us just don't prioritize family the way others do." My hands trembled as I set the phone down on my polished office desk, the weight of those words pressing against my chest. For 3 years, I'd endured their subtle jabs, their backhanded compliments, their dismissive glances. And now this, being branded the family disappointment, all because I couldn't rearrange the most critical client presentation of my career to attend a last-minute family photo shoot. What Melanie didn't know, what none of the Caldwells knew, was that I wasn't just some mid-level employee at Vertex Digital. I was the executive director of marketing operations, the driving force behind the company's explosive growth over the past 2 years. They never asked about my work, never cared to know. To them, I was just Morgan, the awkward outsider who married Devin, the son who dared to stray from the family's prestigious legal empire. Little did Melanie realize that in less than a day, she'd be sitting across from me in a job interview, completely unaware that I'd be the one deciding her fate. I met Devin in my final year of business school when he was finishing his engineering degree. He was brilliant, kind with warm brown eyes that crinkled at the corners when he laughed, a laugh that could melt away my stress after hours of studying. We fell in love over late-night study sessions in the library, fueled by vending machine snacks, and early morning coffee runs to the campus cafe, where we'd talk about everything from our dreams to our fears. When he brought me to meet his family 6 months later, I was a bundle of nerves but brimming with hope. The Caldwells were intimidatingly impressive. Richard, the patriarch, ran a thriving law firm with an iron grip. Eleanor, his wife, was a former state attorney who now managed the firm's operations with a cool efficiency that made me feel small. Their eldest son, Ethan, had followed his father's path without hesitation, joining the family practice and marrying Melanie, a poised socialite whose father was a state senator. Devin, the younger son, was the family's quiet rebel, choosing engineering over law, a decision that earned him subtle disapproval cloaked in polite smiles. That first dinner at their sprawling lakefront home set the tone for everything that followed. I'd worn a simple navy dress, my best attempt at fitting in, but Eleanor's sharp eyes swept over me, lingering on my modest earrings with a faint judgmental purse of her lips. Melanie, seated across from me, offered a tight smile when I mentioned my marketing degree, her expression suggesting it was a quaint little pursuit. The conversation swirled around me, talk of legal cases, political connections, and charity galas, leaving me on the sidelines, an afterthought. "So, Morgan," Richard had said, swirling his expensive scotch, his tone carrying the weight of expectation. "What are your plans after graduation? Teaching, perhaps?" I'd brighten, eager to share. "Actually, I've accepted a position at Vertex Digital," I said, my voice tinged with pride. "It's a fast-growing tech marketing firm, and I'll be managing some of their emerging client accounts." Silence fell over the table, heavy and suffocating. Then Ethan let out a chuckle. "Well, I suppose someone has to make the Facebook posts," he said, sparking laughter from everyone except Devin, who squeezed my hand under the table, his thumb tracing small, reassuring circles. That moment became the blueprint for the next 3 years. Every family gathering was a gauntlet of subtle slights. My career was dismissed as trivial, My middle-class background a quiet stain on their affluent legacy. When Devin and I married in a small, heartfelt ceremony, Eleanor had pushed for a lavish affair, her disappointment palpable when we chose a venue that reflected us, not her vision. Melanie's comments about our cozy craftsman home in a family-friendly neighborhood, compared to her and Ethan's mansion in an upscale enclave, dripped with condescension. "It's so quaint," she'd say, her smile sharp enough to cut. Then came our children, Zoe and Tyler, who brought light to our lives in ways I never thought possible. Zoe, with her bright eyes and endless curiosity, preferred building intricate block towers to playing princess. Tyler, 3 years younger, was sensitive and creative, sketching vibrant worlds in his notebooks. They were our everything, but even they couldn't escape the Caldwell's hierarchy. At Christmas, Eleanor and Richard showered Ethan and Melanie's children, Liam and Sophia, with extravagant gifts, remote-controlled drones, designer clothes, while Zoe and Tyler received practical, almost afterthought presents like books or basic toys. At family events, Melanie orchestrated moments to spotlight her children, relegating mine to the background. "Zoe, sweetie, why don't you help Sophia with her ballet routine? You can turn the music on," she'd suggested at last year's 4th of July barbecue, ignoring that Zoe had spent weeks practicing her own dance to share. The dismissal stung, not just for me but for Zoe, whose small face fell as she nodded obediently. Devin saw it too, the way his family's favoritism cast shadows over us. But years of navigating their dynamics had taught him to avoid confrontation. "They don't mean anything by it," he'd say, his voice soft but strained, as if trying to convince himself. "That's just how they are." Yet I saw the hurt in his eyes when his parents gushed over Ethan's latest courtroom triumph while barely acknowledging Devin's promotion to senior engineering manager, a role he'd earned through relentless dedication. My own career, meanwhile, was soaring. I'd started at Vertex Digital as an account manager, but my innovative campaigns and knack for building client trust propelled me upward. By our second year of marriage, I was leading the marketing operations department. By the time Tyler was born, I joined the executive leadership team, my salary now outstripping Devin's and likely Ethan's, though we never discussed specifics. The irony wasn't lost on me. The career the Caldwells mocked as trivial was funding our comfortable life, our children's college funds, our family vacations, trips that never seemed to align with their events, much to Eleanor's poorly concealed frustration. I never corrected their assumptions about my work. Part of me hoped they'd ask, show a spark of genuine curiosity. They never did. In their eyes, I remained Morgan, the unremarkable wife with a forgettable job. That changed last Tuesday. I was in a strategy meeting with Marcus, our CEO, when my assistant slipped me a note. HR needs final approval on the interview panel for the Director of Client Relations position. This role was pivotal, the face of Vertex Digital to our most valuable clients, tasked with nurturing and expanding those relationships. We'd narrowed the candidates to 3 after a rigorous search, with final interviews set for the next day. After the meeting, I stopped by Diana's office, our HR director, to review the candidate files. "We've got a strong final 3, Diana said, spreading the resumes across her desk. The Jang Group was impressed with their presentations last week. I nodded, skimming the first 2 files, both candidates with stellar credentials. Then I picked up the third, and my heart stopped. Staring back at me from a polished headshot was Melanie Caldwell, my sister-in-law. I blinked, certain I was mistaken, but the resume confirmed it. Experience at her father's political consulting firm, a recent stint at a boutique PR agency that had downsized. "Morgan, is everything okay?" Diana asked, noticing my frozen expression. I forced a nod. "This candidate, Melanie Caldwell, she's my sister-in-law." Diana's eyes widened. "Oh, I had no idea. Her married name threw me off. Is this a conflict of interest?" My mind raced. The professional choice would be to step back, let Marcus or another executive handle her interview. Then my phone buzzed. Melanie's text appeared. "Eleanor says, you're not coming to the family photo shoot on Sunday." Typical Morgan, always the family embarrassment. I guess some of us just don't prioritize family the way others do. 3 years of their condescension crystallized in that moment. The photo shoot, scheduled with barely a week's notice, clashed directly with my presentation to the Jang Group. a client worth millions to Vertex. When I'd explained my work conflict, Eleanor had sighed, "Well, I suppose we'll have to explain your absence again." I looked at Diana, my decision solidifying. "No conflict of interest," I said. "I'll be professional. She doesn't even know what I do here." That night, sleep eluded me. Devin was at a conference in Portland, leaving me alone with my thoughts in our quiet home. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, imagining Melanie's face when she realized I wasn't just a bystander at Vertex, but a key decision maker. Guilt flickered. Maybe I should recuse myself. But a stronger part of me, worn down by years of being diminished, craved the moment she'd see me for who I was. Not for vengeance, but for recognition, for the chance to finally be acknowledged. Wednesday morning dawned with a rare, clear Seattle sky. I dressed deliberately, a tailored charcoal suit that hugged my frame, paired with the pearl earrings Devin gave me for our anniversary. If today was the day Melanie saw me, I wanted to embody the executive I'd become. The morning blurred with meetings and calls, but at 2:15, Diana messaged, "Final interview panel assembling in the glass conference room in 15 minutes. Candidate number 3, Caldwell, arriving now." I gathered my notes, steadied my breath, and walked to the conference room. Through the glass walls, I saw Melanie seated, her back to the door, chatting with Marcus. She looked impeccable, her caramel-highlighted hair in a sleek chignon, her navy dress screaming understated wealth. For a moment, I hesitated. I could walk away, let Marcus and Diana handle it. It would be simpler. Then I remembered Zoe's disappointed face last Christmas, her artwork ignored while Sophia played the piano for applause. I remembered Devin's quiet resignation when his parents forgot our anniversary, but threw an extravagant party for Ethan and Melanie. I squared my shoulders and pushed open the door. "Sorry I'm a bit late," I said, my voice steady, professional. Traffic was heavier than expected. Melanie turned, her practiced smile freezing as recognition hit. Her eyes widened, a subtle crack in her polished facade. "Morgan," she said, recovering quickly. "What a surprise." Marcus glanced between us, puzzled. "You two know each other?" I extended my hand to Melanie as if we were strangers. "Melanie is married to my husband's brother. We're family." The word family carried a weight only she would feel, and her hand trembled slightly as she shook mine. "Well, Aura, isn't that a wonderful coincidence?" Diana said, sensing the tension. "Shall we begin?" The next hour was surreal. Melanie answered questions with poise, outlining her experience and vision for the role. She was good, polished, articulate, but I caught the flush on her neck when I asked tough questions, the way her eyes darted away when I mentioned my role as executive director. I stayed professional, nodding encouragingly, giving no hint of our history. When Marcus asked if I had final questions, Melanie's gaze locked onto mine, a silent plea I couldn't decipher. Was she asking for mercy? Discretion? I smiled. "Just one. Melanie, this role requires building authentic relationships with clients who see through insincerity. How have you handled relationships with people you initially underestimated or misunderstood?" The question was professional but pointed, and we both knew it. Melanie didn't flinch. "First impressions can be misleading," she said carefully. "I've learned to approach relationships with openness and a willingness to revise initial judgments." For the first time, I saw something like genuine acknowledgement in her eyes. After she left, Marcus asked for my thoughts. I gave a balanced assessment, noting Melanie's strengths, but highlighting that Janet Cho, another candidate, had more relevant experience. We unanimously chose Janet. As I left, Diana touched my arm. "That must have been tough." "You handled it with grace," I shrugged. "It's just business." Back in my office, my phone buzzed. "Melanie, can we talk coffee after work? There's a Starbucks in your building lobby." I hesitated, torn between maintaining distance and a faint hope for connection. Finally, I typed, 5:30. This afternoon dragged, my mind replaying the interview. At 5:25, I checked my reflection and headed downstairs. Melanie sat at a corner table with 2 coffees, looking less imposing in casual designer clothes. "I got you a latte," she said. "Devin mentioned it's your favorite." I was surprised she'd remembered. "Thanks," I said, sitting across from her. Silence hung between us, filled by the coffee shop's hum. Then she spoke. "I didn't get the job, did I?" I met her gaze. The decision's not final. A half-truth. She nodded. But if it were up to you, I cut in, it's not just me. It's a panel. Her voice softened. Morgan, can we be real? I sipped with my latte, considering. Okay, real. You probably won't get the job, not because of us, but because Janet has more direct experience. She nodded, absorbing it, and for the first time I saw vulnerability in her eyes, a crack in the facade I'd never expected. I gave a small nod, acknowledging her words. I appreciate your honesty, I said, my voice steady, but laced with the weight of years unspoken. Melanie's manicured finger traced the rim of her coffee cup, a nervous gesture that betrayed the polished exterior she always wore like armor. Her eyes, usually so sharp and composed, flickered with something softer, almost fragile. I had no idea, Morgan, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper, about your role at Vertex, about any of it. Really, I never thought to ask. The confession hung between us, heavy with the unspoken truth of our strained relationship. You never did, I replied, keeping my tone even, though the words carried a quiet edge. I wasn't going to soften the truth for her, not after years of her dismissive remarks, her subtle jabs that had chipped away at my confidence. Melanie flinched, a fleeting wince crossing her face, and for a moment, I saw something like shame shadow her features. When I walked into that interview room today and saw you sitting there, she continued, her voice trembling slightly, I've never been more stunned in my life. You, an executive, the director of marketing operations. I couldn't believe it. I fought to keep my composure, the memory of her shock still vivid. In that sterile conference room, with its glass walls and sleek furniture, I'd watched her carefully curated confidence falter as she realized the woman she'd underestimated for years was the one holding the power. You handled it well, I said, offering a measured nod. Very professional. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and she looked down at her cup, her fingers tightening around it. Unlike how I've been with you all these years, she said softly, the admission raw and unguarded. I've been less than kind. Her words were an understatement, and I stayed silent, neither agreeing nor disagreeing. After years of her belittling comments, her texts labeling me the family embarrassment, I wasn't about to make this moment easier for her. Let her sit with it. Melanie took a shaky breath, her eyes searching the air as if the right words might materialize. I've been insecure, she confessed, her voice cracking. Jealous even. The admission caught me off guard, and I felt a flicker of surprise. Jealous of what? I asked, genuinely curious. She hesitated, her gaze dropping to the table before meeting mine again. Of how you and Devin just chose your own path. You didn't care about the expectations, the rules the rest of us were following. Ethan and I, she paused, her voice catching. We've spent our entire marriage playing these roles, trying to be the perfect Caldwell couple. The right house in the right neighborhood, the right schools, the right social circles, all laid out like a blueprint by Richard and Eleanor. Do you know how exhausting that is? Her voice broke, and for the first time I saw the cracks in her flawless facade, the weight of a life spent chasing someone else's definition of success. I thought of our home, a cozy craftsman filled with mismatched furniture we'd collected over the years, each piece chosen for love, not status. I pictured Devin's workshop in the garage where he spent weekends building birdhouses with Zoe and Tyler, their laughter echoing through the house. I remembered our family movie nights, all of us sprawled on the couch in pajamas, bowls of homemade popcorn scattered around us. No, I said honestly, meeting her gaze. I don't know what that's like. Melanie's eyes glistened and she shook her head, a bitter smile tugging at her lips. When you and Devin decided to just live your way, I resented it. You seemed so free, so unburdened by what the family expected. And her voice caught again, and she swallowed hard. I've been suffocating under it all. Her words hung in the air, raw and unguarded. And for the first time, I saw the toll her carefully constructed life had taken. Beneath the perfect makeup, the designer clothes, there was a weariness in her eyes, a strain that no amount of polish could hide. Is that why you applied at Vertex? I asked, leaning forward slightly. To find something that was yours, not tied to the Caldwells? She nodded, her fingers twisting the napkin in her lap. The consulting firm I was with downsized, And suddenly I had a chance to do something different, something that wasn't about my father or Ethan's family. But then she let out a humorless laugh, shaking her head. Of all the places I end up interviewing at your company, life's got a cruel sense of humor, doesn't it? I couldn't help but agree, a small smile tugging at my lips. It does. Melanie's composure wavered further, and she looked at me directly, her eyes pleading. I'm sorry, Morgan, she said, her voice thick with emotion, for how I've treated you, for that awful text about you being the family embarrassment. For all of it, it was never about you, it was about me, my own insecurities, my own failures. Her apology hit me like a wave, stirring a complex mix of emotions I hadn't expected. For 3 years, I'd waited for some kind of acknowledgement, some sign that she recognized the hurt she'd caused. But now, standing on the other side of it, I felt no triumph, no vindication. Instead, there was relief, tinged with sadness and an unexpected swell of empathy. I appreciate that, I said carefully, my voice softer than I'd intended. But Melanie, it wasn't just me. It's been Devin, too. And our kids. She flinched, her face crumpling slightly. I know, she whispered. I've been thinking about that all day. Seeing you in that conference room, so confident, so respected, it made me question everything. The way I've acted, the way I've judged you. She hesitated, then added, Zoe's artwork is incredible, isn't it? She showed me her sketchbook last time you visited, but I didn't really see it. I should have. The mention of my daughter's talent, so often overlooked by the Caldwells, caught me off guard. It was a small gesture, but it touched something deep inside me, a place where I tucked away the hurt of their indifference. Yes, I said, my voice softening further. She's so creative. Melanie's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, and one slipped down her cheek. She brushed it away quickly, as if embarrassed by the crack in her armor. I've been so focused on keeping up this perfect image that I've missed what's real, she admitted. I've missed the chance to know my niece and nephew, to really know you. I took a slow sip of my latte, letting her words settle. They were heavy with regret, but also with a fragile hope, a desire to mend what had been broken. Where does this leave us, Melanie? I asked, my tone gentle but firm. She straightened her shoulders, a flicker of determination in her eyes. That's up to you, she said. I know one conversation doesn't erase years of my behavior, but I want to do better, to be better. A faint, self-conscious smile crossed her lips. Assuming we can get past the awkwardness of me interviewing with my sister-in-law, who I've treated so poorly. Despite everything, I found myself smiling back. It'll make a hell of a story someday, I said, my voice lighter than I felt. For what it's worth, Melanie added, her tone earnest, you were incredible in that interview room. I would have been a mess if our roles were reversed. Years of practice keeping my cool at family gatherings, I replied, only half joking. Her wince told me the jab had landed, but there was no malice in it. I deserved that, she said quietly. She hesitated, then pressed on. The family photo shoot this Sunday. I understand why you can't make it. Your work is important. Yes, I said simply. It is. She nodded, gathering her purse as if preparing to leave, then paused. This is presumptuous, but are there other positions opening at Vertex? Not under you, obviously, but... Her voice trailed off, and I saw a flicker of hope in her eyes, tempered by uncertainty. I considered her question. Despite our history, Melanie had proven herself qualified during the interview, her poise and expertise undeniable. We're expanding our public relations department next quarter, I said. It'd be a lateral move from your last role, but with more growth potential. Her eyes lit up, a spark of possibility breaking through the weight of our conversation. Would it be inappropriate for me to apply, given our connection? Not if we're transparent about it, I said. I can recuse myself from the hiring process to avoid any conflict. Thank you, she said softly, her voice thick with gratitude. Not just for that, but for even having this conversation with me after everything. As we stood to leave, Melanie hesitated and then stepped forward and gave me a quick, awkward hug. Thank you, Morgan, she murmured, for being kinder today than I deserve. I watched her walk toward the parking garage, her posture not quite as rigid as usual, her steps slower, as if she carried a new weight. or perhaps had shed one. For the first time since I'd known her, Melanie seemed human. Flawed, insecure, struggling beneath the glossy exterior she'd spent years perfecting. Driving home to pick up Zoe and Tyler from their after-school program, I felt an unexpected lightness. Not because I'd won some victory over Melanie, but because something real had finally pierced the artificial wall that had defined our relationship for so long. That evening, as I helped Zoe with her science project and listened to Tyler's animated recounting of his day, I found myself thinking about family, not as a source of tension or obligation, but as something that could perhaps be rebuilt on more honest terms. When Devin called from his conference that night, I poured out the whole story, the interview, Melanie's apology, the raw vulnerability she'd shown. So my perfect sister-in-law interviewed for a job with my supposedly career-challenged wife, who turns out to be an executive, he summarized, amusement dancing in his voice. I wish I could have seen her face. It wasn't about humiliating her, I said, surprised to realize I meant it. It was complicated. I know, he said, his tone softening. That's why I love you. So what happens now? I thought of Melanie's invitation to the anniversary dinner, her admission of her own struggles, the fragile hope in her eyes. I'm not sure, I admitted, but I think something might be changing. Good, Devin said firmly. It's about time. After we hung up, I sat on our porch swing, the Seattle sky fading into twilight. The next day would bring new challenges, the John Group presentation, decisions about the client relations position, the relentless demands of my role at Vertex. But for the first time in years, the thought of the next Caldwell family gathering didn't fill me with dread. Instead, I felt a cautious flicker of hope. Hope that the walls of pretense and judgment might finally be crumbling, making room for something more authentic to take root. The day after my interview, I found myself replaying the coffee shop conversation with Melanie, my sister-in-law, over and over in my mind. There was something raw and unguarded in her apology, a vulnerability I'd never seen before in her polished, put-together demeanor. Her words had carried a weight of sincerity that caught me off guard, stirring a mix of hope and skepticism in my chest. I sat across from Devin, my husband, at our kitchen table, recounting every detail. The way Melanie's eyes had softened, the slight tremble in her voice as she admitted her past dismissals of me. It felt like a crack in the icy wall that had long separated us, though I couldn't shake the nagging doubt that her change of heart might be fleeting. Wow, Devin said when I finished, leaning back in his chair with a look of disbelief. That doesn't sound like the Melanie I know. His tone carried a mix of surprise and wariness, mirroring my own conflicted feelings. Devin had always been my anchor, his loyalty a steady warmth in the face of his family's often cold indifference. I thought the same thing, I admitted, stirring my coffee absent-mindedly. But there was something real about it, Dev. I think seeing me in that conference room, commanding the respect of Marcus and Diana, it shifted something in her, like she was forced to see me as more than just your wife. The memory of Melanie's wide-eyed pause during the meeting, the way her usual air of superiority had faltered, lingered in my mind. It was as if she'd glimpsed a version of me she hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge before. Good, Devin said, his voice firm, his jaw tightening with a protective edge. It's about time someone in my family saw you clearly. His words wrapped around me like a warm blanket, soothing the ache of years spent on the periphery of his family's approval. Devin had always been my defender, but I could see the toll it took on him, caught between his love for me and the weight of his family's expectations. Speaking of family, I said, shifting the conversation, your mother called about rescheduling the photo shoot for next weekend. I told her no. My tone was steady, but inside my emotions churned. It's not about the timing, Dev. It's about the years of being treated like an afterthought. Me, Zoe, Tyler. One moment of clarity about my job title doesn't erase all that. The hurt of being overlooked, of watching my children relegated to second-tier status compared to their cousins, Liam and Sophia, burned in my chest. I'd swallowed it for years, but I was done pretending it didn't matter. Devin was quiet for a moment, his eyes searching mine. You're right, he said finally, his voice low but resolute. It doesn't. Another pause, heavy with unspoken regret. I'm sorry I haven't done more to stop it. You've been caught in the middle, and I've let it slide too many times. His admission hung between us, raw and honest. I could see the guilt in his eyes, the weight of being torn between his parents' world and the life we'd built together. It's not easy standing up to your parents, I acknowledged, reaching for his hand. I know that. The Caldwells were a force, Richard with his imposing presence, Eleanor with her subtle manipulations. Navigating their expectations was like walking through a minefield. But then Devon's expression hardened, a spark of determination flickering in his eyes. Maybe it's time I did, though, he said, his voice carrying a new edge. I'm tired of watching them dismiss the most important people in my life. The resolve in his tone sent a shiver through me. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about Zoe and Tyler, about carving out a space where our family could stand on equal footing. We talked for a while longer, shifting to lighter topics. The Jong contract, a major win at work that had elevated my standing, and the kids' day at school. We ended with our usual I love you, a ritual that grounded me no matter how chaotic life became. As I hung up and pulled into our driveway, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked at the curb, a sleek black Audi that sent a sinking feeling through my gut. I recognized it immediately as Richard's. Sure enough, as I approached the front door, it swung open to reveal my father-in-law, impeccable as always in a tailored suit despite the casual setting. "Morgan," he greeted, his voice dripping with a practiced warmth that set my nerves on edge. "I hope you don't mind the surprise visit. I was in the neighborhood for a meeting and thought I'd stop by to see the grandchildren." His smile was too polished, too calculated, and I bristled at the pretense. In 3 years, Richard had never just stopped by to see Zoe and Tyler. Every visit had been meticulously planned, usually at their sprawling lakefront estate or during grand family gatherings where we were expected to play our parts. "The kids are at their after-school programs," I said, brushing past him into my own home, my tone clipped. "They won't be back for another hour." "Oh, well, that gives us a chance to chat, doesn't it?" Richard followed me inside, his eyes sweeping over our living room as if cataloging every detail. "Lovely home you have. Very comfortable." The pause before comfortable carried a world of condescension. Our craftsman-style house, warm and well-loved, couldn't compare to the Caldwell estate or Ethan and Melanie's ostentatious mini-mansion. The slight stung, but I refused to let it show. "Thank you, we like it," I said, setting my briefcase down with deliberate calm, not bothering to offer him coffee or a seat. "What did you want to talk about, Richard?" My directness seemed to catch him off guard. He settled onto our couch, crossing one leg over the other with the ease of someone accustomed to commanding any room. "Eleanor mentioned you had a big presentation today," he said, his tone an awkward attempt at interest. "How did it go?" The effort was so transparent I nearly laughed. Richard had never once asked about my career in 3 years, and now here he was, feigning curiosity. "It went well," I said simply, offering nothing more. I waited, knowing there was more to this visit than a sudden interest in my work. He nodded as if he had expected nothing less. Good. The Jong Group, was it? Quite a prestigious client." His words were careful, but I could feel the shift in his demeanor, the subtle recalibration now that he knew I wasn't just some mid-level marketing drone. Then he cleared his throat, and I braced myself. "Melanie came to see us last night. She was quite upset." "So I heard," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "She seems to believe we, that is, Eleanor and I, have been less than supportive of you and Devon, and the children, of course." His discomfort was palpable, his usual confidence faltering under my steady gaze. I raised an eyebrow. "And what do you think?" Richard shifted, unaccustomed to being challenged so directly. "Well, I think perhaps there have been some misunderstandings, cultural differences, if you will." The phrase landed like a slap, and I couldn't hold back my response. "Cultural differences?" I repeated, my voice flat. "Is that what you call it when you dismiss my career as trivial? When you ignore Zoe's art? Or treat Tyler's sensitivity like something to be fixed?" Richard's face reddened slightly, a rare crack in his composed exterior. "Now that's not fair, Morgan. We love our grandchildren." "Love isn't just a feeling, Richard," I said, my voice steady but sharp. "It's showing up. It's noticing Zoe's drawings, cheering at Tyler's dance recitals. It's treating them with the same enthusiasm you shower on Liam and Sophia. The words poured out, years of frustration breaking free. I could see the shock in Richard's eyes. He wasn't used to this version of me, the one who didn't bend over backward to keep the peace. I, we, he faltered, then regrouped. Perhaps we've been remiss in some ways. Old habits, you understand. His attempt at an explanation felt hollow, but there was a flicker of something genuine beneath it. We'd like to make amends. I studied him, searching for sincerity behind his lawyer's polish. Why now, Richard? Because you found out I have a title you respect? Because I might be useful to your social network now? He flinched, the accusation hitting its mark. That's rather harsh, was it? I countered. Last Thanksgiving, you spent 20 minutes discussing Ethan's latest case. You didn't ask Devin a single question about his work. Not one. The memory still stung, Devin's quiet resignation as his father fawned over Ethan, the golden son. Richard opened his mouth, then closed it, at a loss. Finally, he sighed. I suppose I deserve that. The small admission caught me off guard. Richard Caldwell didn't admit fault. Look, Morgan, he continued, his tone softening. I'm not good at this, emotional conversations. But Melanie said some things last night that made Eleanor and me reflect on how we've treated you and Devin, the message we've sent to Zoe and Tyler. I stayed silent, letting him continue. I won't pretend I fully understand your world, this tech marketing business, he said, gesturing vaguely. But I do understand dedication and ambition. And if this Jong contract is what Melanie says it is, you clearly have both in spades. It wasn't an apology, not quite. But for Richard, it was as close as I'd ever heard. What do you want, Richard? I asked, cutting to the point. He straightened his tie, a nervous habit. We're hosting a dinner this Friday. Some important clients, a few colleagues. We'd like you and Devin to attend. There it was, the real reason for his visit. Now that they knew my position, the Caldwells wanted to parade me as a trophy, a connection to the prestigious Jong Group. As what? I asked coolly. Window dressing for your clients? Richard looked uncomfortable. As family, Morgan, as our son and daughter-in-law. I considered refusing outright, but something stopped me. This wasn't just about me or Richard or even Devin. It was about Zoe and Tyler, about creating a family dynamic where they weren't sidelined. I'll discuss it with Devin when he returns, I said finally. But Richard, if we come, things need to be different. Not just for one dinner, but going forward. He nodded slowly. I understand. As he rose to leave, his gaze landed on a framed drawing of Zoe's, an imaginative underwater scene filled with mermaids and vibrant sea creatures. Did Zoe draw this? He asked, his curiosity genuine. Yes, last summer, I said, surprised by his interest. He stepped closer, studying it. She's quite talented, isn't she? Those colors. Very sophisticated for her age. It was a small moment, a grandfather noticing his granddaughter's art, but it brought an unexpected lump to my throat. She takes after Devin, I said softly. He loved to draw as a child. Richard's expression softened, a rare glimpse of nostalgia breaking through. Yes, he did. I have a drawing of his framed in my office, a rocket ship he designed when he was about 9. He smiled faintly. I always thought he'd be an astronaut. The image of a younger Richard treasuring Devin's creativity before the weight of family expectations had pushed him toward law school was both heartwarming and heartbreaking. What might their relationship have been if Richard had nurtured Devin's passions instead of molding him to fit the Caldwell legacy? After Richard left, I sat in the quiet house, my mind swirling with the day's events. In just 24 hours, Melanie had apologized, Eleanor had acknowledged my career, and Richard had noticed Zoe's art. It felt like the Caldwell family dynamic, long frozen in place, was beginning to thaw, unevenly, unpredictably, but undeniably. As I picked up Zoe and Tyler from their after-school programs, I watched them closely, wondering how they'd internalized the subtle hierarchies of their extended family. Did they feel less valued than their cousins? Had they noticed the way Richard and Eleanor doted on Liam and Sophia while offering them only polite indifference? Mom, look what I made! Tyler bounded toward me, clutching a clay dragon, its scales and wings crafted with surprising care for a 5-year-old. I knelt to admire it, my heart swelling at his pride. It's amazing, Ty, I said, ruffling his hair. We should show Grandpa Richard next time we see him. Tyler's face fell slightly. He won't care. He likes Liam's sports trophies better. The matter-of-fact tone, the quiet acceptance of being overlooked, shattered me. They had noticed. Of course they had. You know what? I said, bursting brightness into my voice. I think Grandpa might surprise you. I hoped it was true, that Richard's small gesture toward Zoe's art was a sign of something more. Later that evening, after the kids were in bed, I received a text from Melanie that stopped me in my tracks. Diana from your HR but called me today about a PR manager position. Did you have something to do with that? The question hung in the air, and I chose my words carefully, not wanting to seem patronizing but unwilling to lie. Diana makes her own decisions about candidates, but she did mention she thought you might be a good fit for the role, I replied. 3 dots appeared, vanished, then reappeared. Finally, thank you, I have an interview next week. This means a lot to me, Morgan. Her gratitude felt raw, unguarded, and I wasn't sure how to respond. I settled on, good luck with the interview. A moment later, another text arrived. I meant what I said yesterday about doing better, being better. Starting with how I talk about you to the family. I'm sorry it took something like this for me to see clearly. I stared at the screen, trying to reconcile this reflective, vulnerable Melanie with the woman who had dismissed me for years. People didn't change overnight, I knew that, but the shock of our encounter in the conference room seemed to have sparked something real in her. One day at a time, I texted back, not quite forgiveness, but an opening. A willingness to see where this shift might lead. When Devin called later, I filled him in on Richard's visit and the dinner invitation. Friday? He said, skepticism lacing his voice. That's 2 days after I get back. Convenient timing, don't you think? Now that they know you're not just playing with Facebook posts, they want to show us off. I thought the same, I admitted. But I'm wondering if we should go, not to forgive and forget, but to set a new normal. If they're finally seeing us clearly, don't we owe it to the kids to try? Devin was quiet, then asked, did something specific happen with the kids? I told him about Tyler's comment about his clay dragon, the casual acceptance that his grandfather valued Liam's trophies more. Damn it, Devin said, his voice tight with emotion. I didn't realize they were picking up on it so clearly. Kids always do, I said softly. They're more perceptive than we think. Another silence, then a sigh. Okay, we'll go to the dinner, but Morgan, I'm done staying quiet. If my parents or Ethan say anything dismissive about you or the kids, I'm calling it out on the spot. That sounds fair, I said, relief washing over me. Oh, and one more thing. Melanie has an interview for a PR manager position at Vertex next week. Devin laughed, incredulous. Seriously? I'll try. Is the universe playing a cosmic joke on us? Beginning to think so, I said, smiling despite myself. But I think this could be good for her. She mentioned yesterday that she's been suffocating under your parents' expectations, that she's jealous we chose our own path. Melanie, jealous of us? Devin sounded stunned. With their house, their country club membership, their perfect Caldwell life. Appearances can be deceiving, I reminded him. Maybe there's more going on beneath the surface than we realized. That night I lay awake, my mind racing with the day's events, the John contract, Richard's visit, Melanie's texts. For years I'd kept my professional success separate from the family that refused to see it, but now those walls were crumbling. The question wasn't just whether the Caldwells could change their view of me, but whether I was ready to let them see the real me. Confident, unapologetic, no longer willing to shrink to fit their expectations. As I thought of Zoe and Tyler, I realized this was about more than me. They were watching, learning from every interaction, every family dynamic. I owed it to them to show what it looked like to stand in your truth, to demand respect rather than settle for tolerance. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new conversations, perhaps new conflicts. But for the first time, I felt ready, not as Devin's accommodating wife, but as Morgan, executive director, mother, and woman who no longer needed permission to claim her place. The next morning, as I reviewed quarterly projections, my assistant, Olivia, appeared at my office door, her expression unusually tense. "Morgan, there's a woman here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's insistent." I frowned, glancing at my packed calendar. "Who is it?" "She says she's your sister-in-law, Melanie Caldwell." Surprise jolted through me. After our coffee shop talk and texts, I hadn't expected to see Melanie again so soon. "Send her in," I said, setting down my pen. Melanie appeared moments later, looking unlike herself. Her usually flawless hair was pulled into a messy ponytail, her face bare of makeup, a stark contrast to her typical polish. "Morgan, I'm sorry to barge in like this," she said, her voice tight with barely contained emotion. "I wouldn't have come if it wasn't important." I gestured to the chair across my desk. "What's going on?" She sat, her posture rigid. "It's Ethan. He found out about my interview here, about our conversation, and he's furious. Says I'm betraying the family by even considering a job outside the Caldwell network." Her voice cracked, and I saw the weight of her husband's disapproval pressing down on her, unraveling the confident facade she'd always worn. I leaned forward, keeping my tone calm but firm. "Melanie, what do you want? Not Ethan, not your parents, what do you want?" Her eyes welled with tears, and for the first time I saw not the poised sister-in-law who judged me, but a woman grappling with her own identity, caught in the same web of expectations that had once tried to cage Devon. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper, "but I think I want to find out." The air in my office felt heavy as Melanie sat across from me, her fingers twisting her wedding ring with a nervous intensity that betrayed the polished facade she usually wore. Her accusation still echoed in my mind. "You betrayed the family by airing our dirty laundry." Her laugh was brittle, hollow, as though I were an outsider peering into the Caldwell family's carefully guarded world. I leaned back in my chair, my thoughts racing to untangle the mess she just laid at my feet. How had Ethan found out about her visit to my house? The question gnawed at me, but before I could ask, Melanie's voice, taut with anxiety, filled the silence. "Richard told him," she said, her eyes flickering with a mix of guilt and fear. "Ethan put it together and confronted me last night. It was ugly, Morgan. Really ugly." Her voice trembled, and for the first time I saw not the poised sister-in-law who always seemed to glide through life, but a woman unraveling under the weight of her choices. I studied her, searching for the truth behind her distress. Was this genuine, or was it another layer of the Caldwell family drama I'd spent years navigating? "I'm sorry to hear that, Melanie," I said, keeping my tone even. "But what exactly do you want from me?" Her gaze met mine, direct and unguarded, a rare vulnerability in her eyes. "Advice, maybe. Support. I've never seen Ethan like this. He's threatening to call your HR department, Morgan, to tell them I'm emotionally unstable, unfit for the job." Her words hit like a slap, and a spark of anger flared in my chest. "He can't do that," I said firmly. "HR doesn't make decisions based on baseless claims from family members." Melanie nodded, but her hesitation told me there was more. "He's also talking about calling Marcus directly," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper, "using Richard's connections to sabotage me." The audacity of it sent a surge of indignation through me. Ethan, leveraging his father's influence to undermine Melanie's chance at independence, was a new low, even for him. "That's completely inappropriate," I said, my voice sharp. Melanie's composure cracked, her voice breaking as she spoke. "I know. That's why I'm here, Morgan. I know we've never been close and I've been difficult, but I want this job. I need it." Her words carried a weight that went beyond desperation, and I found myself studying her anew. Beneath the strain in her face, I saw a flicker of something raw, something I hadn't expected from her, a longing to break free. "Why is this job so important to you, Melanie?" I asked, leaning forward, genuinely curious. "Beyond the money." She fell silent, her fingers stilling on her ring. When she spoke, her voice was soft, almost confessional, "Because it would be mine. Not something handed to me by Ethan or Richard or my father. Something I earned. Something that proves I'm more than just their shadow." Her words struck a chord deep within me. Despite our rocky history, I understood that hunger, to be seen for who you are, not for the roles others impose on you. It was a desire I'd fought for myself, against the same family expectations that had long dismissed me as merely Devon's wife. I exhaled, choosing my words carefully. Look, Melanie, I can't promise you'll get the job. Thompson makes those decisions based on qualifications alone. But I can promise Ethan's threats won't sway the process. Vertex doesn't work that way. Relief flooded her face, softening the lines of tension. Thank you, she whispered. I shook my head. Don't thank me yet. If you get this job, it'll be because you earned it. And it won't be easy. You'll be judged on your work, nothing else. No family ties, no special treatment. To my surprise, Melanie didn't flinch. Instead, she straightened, a spark of determination igniting in her eyes. That's exactly what I want. Our conversation was cut short by Olivia, my assistant, poking her head in. Sorry, Morgan, your 11 o'clock is here. The Mackenzie team. I nodded, signaling I'd be there soon. As Melanie stood to leave, she hesitated, her voice tentative. One more thing. Ethan's saying he won't come to the dinner on Friday if you and Devon are there. I raised an eyebrow, a mix of amusement and exasperation bubbling up. And? Melanie's lips curved into a small, defiant smile. I told him he's being childish, a first in our marriage. Her unexpected candor drew a laugh from me. Look at you, standing up to the Caldwell men, learning from me, maybe. Her expression sobered. Thank you, Morgan, for listening, for not throwing me out, which you had every right to do. As she left, I sat back, recalibrating my view of Melanie Caldwell. The perfect, untouchable sister-in-law, always secure in her place at the top of the family hierarchy, was fighting her own battles against the same oppressive expectations that had sidelined Devon and me for years. The realization lingered through my meeting with the Mackenzie team, through a hurried lunch and into an afternoon of calls and strategy sessions. By the time I drove home, I'd made a decision. Whatever unfolded at Friday's dinner, whatever new drama the Caldwells conjured, I would face it as Morgan Taylor, executive director, wife, mother, and a woman who no longer needed their approval to know her worth. Friday came too quickly. Devon had returned from his conference the night before, and we'd stayed up late dissecting the sudden shifts in his family's behavior. He wavered between skepticism and cautious hope. Mom called to ask about Zoe's favorite dessert, he said, adjusting his tie as we dressed for the dinner. She's never done that before. I paused, lipstick in hand, caught off guard by the gesture. What did you tell her? That Zoe loves strawberry cheesecake and Tyler's obsessed with chocolate lava cakes. A smile tugged at his lips. She wrote it down, Morgan. I heard her making notes. I met his eyes in the mirror, tempering his optimism with reality. It's a start, Devon, but tonight isn't just about family. Your father wants to parade me in front of his colleagues now that he knows about my Jong Group connections. Devon's smile faded, his jaw tightening. Classic Richard, always working an angle. He crossed the room, wrapping his arms around my waist. But we're not going around, wrapping his arms around my waist. But we're not going for him. We're going for us, for the kids, to set new boundaries. I leaned into his warmth, drawing strength from his resolve. Agreed. No more shrinking to keep the peace. We left Zoe and Tyler with Jessica, my colleague and friend, and arrived at Eleanor and Richard's lakefront home. The house was as imposing as ever, its manicured grounds and pristine facade radiating unattainable perfection. To my surprise, Eleanor opened the door herself, her warmth uncharacteristically genuine. Devon, Morgan, we're so glad you could make it. She led us to the back terrace, her chatter about the guest list, Judge Harrington, the Wilsons, the Bakers, tinged with a nervous edge. Her careful emphasis on their titles screamed her intent to impress me, as if my new status as executive director suddenly made me worthy of their elite circle. The irony stung. The terrace buzzed with about 20 guests, their understated wealth evident in tailored suits and subtle jewelry. Richard stood by the stone railing, deep in conversation with Judge Harrington, but broke away when he saw us. There you are, he said, clapping Devon on the shoulder with an enthusiasm that felt forced. Morgan, you look lovely. I was just telling John Wilson about your work with the Jong Group. He's very impressed. Devon and I exchanged a glance, his expression confirming my suspicions. Richard was capitalizing on my success. I kept my response measured. The Jong contract is a team effort, Richard. I'm just one piece of the puzzle. But Richard was undeterred, guiding us toward a group of guests and announcing, Morgan here is executive director at Vertex Digital. They've just secured a major international client. Very prestigious work. For the next half hour, I was his prized exhibit, paraded before his colleagues with glowing accounts of achievements he'd only learned about days ago. Devin stayed close, his hand a steady anchor at my back, his face a mix of amusement and irritation. I noticed Ethan's absence during a conversation with John Wilson's wife. Scanning the crowd, I saw no sign of him or Melanie. Eleanor appeared at my side, a glass of wine in hand. "They're not coming," she murmured. Ethan called to say they had other commitments. Her neutral tone hid something deeper. I thought of Melanie's visit, her fear of Ethan's anger. "Other commitments? Or is Ethan refusing to come because we're here?" I asked quietly. Eleanor's composure flickered, surprised by my bluntness. "There may have been some discussion about that," she admitted, sipping her wine to avoid my gaze. "Ethan's always been sensitive about family matters." "You mean he's always gotten his way?" I corrected gently. To my surprise, Eleanor didn't argue. After Devin chose engineering over law, Ethan became Richard's focus, his legacy. Perhaps we've been too accommodating. It was the closest she'd ever come to admitting favoritism. Dinner was announced, and we moved to the dining room, where Eleanor's finest china gleamed under soft lighting. I was seated near the head of the table, across from Judge Harrington and next to Richard, a clear move to showcase me. Devin, several seats away, caught my eye, his raised eyebrow asking if I was okay. I nodded, settling in as Richard steered the conversation toward Asian markets, setting me up to shine. "Morgan, your company's agreement with the Jong Group puts you at the forefront of these shifts," he said smoothly. I played along, aware of the surreal shift in his behavior, as if he'd always championed my career. My phone buzzed during the soup course. Ignoring it at first, I checked when it buzzed again. 2 texts from Melanie. "Are you at the dinner? Please call when you can. It's important." I slipped the phone back into my clutch, but by dessert, strawberry cheesecake and chocolate lava cakes, I noted with a pang, it had buzzed 3 more times. Excusing myself, I retreated to the powder room to read Melanie's increasingly frantic messages. Ethan had stormed out after a fight about her interview, and he wasn't answering his phone. I called her, and she picked up immediately, her voice tight with panic. "Morgan, has Ethan shown up there?" "No," I said. "Eleanor said you both had other commitments." Melanie's sharp breath confirmed my suspicions. "We fought about the job, about me talking to you. He left hours ago, and I'm worried. He was so angry." A knock interrupted, Eleanor checking on me. I promised Melanie I'd text if Ethan appeared and returned to the table, where Richard was now praising Devin's engineering award, another jarring departure from his usual focus on Ethan. The dining room doors burst open with a crash. Ethan stood there disheveled, his tie askew, his face flushed with anger and alcohol. "Well, isn't this cozy?" he slurred, glaring at the silent table. "The family dinner I wasn't invited to." Eleanor stood pale. "Ethan, you said you couldn't come." "No, Mother," he snapped, pointing at Devin and me. "I said I wouldn't come if they were here, but why should I be the one left out?" The dining room, once a stage for polished pleasantries, now crackled with raw tension, as if the air itself held its breath. Richard stood, his face a storm cloud of barely contained fury, his jaw tight and his eyes flashing with a mix of embarrassment and rage. "Ethan, you're drunk," he said, his voice a low growl, each word heavy with disapproval. "This is completely inappropriate. We have guests." His gaze flicked toward the colleagues seated around the table, their faces frozen in awkward silence, witnesses to a family unraveling. Ethan swayed as he staggered into the room, his bitter laugh cutting through the stillness like a jagged knife. "Oh yes, your precious guests," he sneered, his voice thick with sarcasm and the sharp edge of too much whiskey. "By all means, let's keep up the facade. That's what matters most, isn't it, Dad? Appearances?" His words dripped with years of pent-up resentment, each syllable a rebellion against the polished image the Caldwell family had so carefully crafted. Devin shifted in his seat, his instinct to intervene clear in the tightening of his shoulders. But I caught his eye with a subtle shake of my head. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from the weight of navigating this volatile moment. Adding more voices to this fire would only make it blaze hotter. I stayed still, my hands folded calmly in my lap, though inside my mind raced, calculating how to keep this from spiraling further. Ethan's attention snapped to me, his eyes narrowing into slits, glinting with something dark and accusatory. "Morgan," he said, my name a weapon in his mouth. "The woman of the hour, executive, director, so important, so accomplished." Each word was a mockery, laced with venom, as if my success was a personal affront to him. "Did you all know she's been manipulating my wife? Turning Melanie against me? Against this family?" His voice rose, unsteady but piercing, and the room fell into a stunned, suffocating silence. I kept my face neutral, a practiced mask honed over years of boardroom battles and family slights. Ethan wanted a reaction, a crack in my composure, but I refused to give him the satisfaction. My pulse quickened, not from his words, but from the weight of every eye around the table now fixed on me, waiting for me to falter. I wouldn't. Not here. Not now. "Ethan, that's enough," Richard said, his tone low and dangerous. A father trying to rein in a wayward son while preserving the dignity of the moment. But Ethan was beyond restraint, his grip on the back of an empty chair shaky as he leaned forward, his face flushed with alcohol and fury. "A scene?" he spat. "You want to talk about scenes? How about the scene where you parade Morgan around like she's the family's success story now, after years of treating her like she was nothing? After years of treating Devin like the family disappointment?" Devin stood then, ignoring my earlier silent plea, his movements deliberate but heavy with suppressed anger. "Ethan, you're drunk," he said, his voice steady but edged with steel. "Let's take this somewhere private." His eyes, usually warm and calm, were hard now, reflecting a lifetime of navigating his brother's volatility and their parents' expectations. "Privacy?" Ethan's laugh was a twisted, bitter thing, his face contorting with years of unspoken grievances. "Now you want privacy when it's finally your turn in the spotlight? Always the peacemaker, Devin, never rocking the boat. Well, guess what? I'm done pretending everything's fine just to make you feel better." His words were a raw wound, exposing the fractures beneath the Caldwell family's polished exterior. Eleanor, her face pale and her hands trembling, moved to Ethan's side, her touch gentle but urgent as she tried to guide him toward the door. "Please, darling," she murmured, her voice thick with desperation. "You're not yourself. Let's get you home to Melanie." But at the mention of his wife, Ethan's expression darkened further, his eyes wild with a mix of betrayal and fear. "Melanie," he said, my name now a bitter curse on his lips. "My perfect, loyal wife, who's now applying for jobs behind my back, taking career advice from Morgan." He spat my name again as if it burned his tongue. "The family embarrassment is suddenly the family role model." The words hit like a physical blow, though I didn't flinch. The phrase, "the family embarrassment," echoed from a text Melanie had sent me days ago, her casual cruelty cutting deeper than I'd admitted at the time. I felt Devin's gaze on me, saw the dawning realization in his eyes as he connected the dots. "That's what you've been calling Morgan," he said, his voice dangerously quiet, a storm gathering beneath the surface. "The family embarrassment?" Ethan smirked, undeterred by Eleanor's attempts to usher him out. "Ask Melanie. She's the one who said it first. Morgan's always been the family embarrassment." Her exact words. His smirk was a challenge, daring anyone to contradict him, even as Eleanor's grip on his arm tightened, her face a mask of panic. I thought of that text, the one that had appeared on my phone just as I learned Melanie had applied to Vertex, the company where I held a leadership role. Her words had stung, a reminder of the hierarchy within the Caldwell family, where I'd always been an outsider, tolerated but never embraced. But now, as Ethan hurled those words into the open, I felt something shift inside me, not shame, but a quiet resolve. I wasn't that person anymore, the one who shrank to fit their narrative. Devin's face hardened, a rare glimpse of pure, cold anger that I'd seen only a handful of times in our years together. "And you wonder why we've kept our distance from this family," he said, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. Why we've created our own traditions, our own celebrations. His words were for Ethan, but they were also for Richard and Eleanor, an indictment of the dynamics they'd nurtured for years. Richard tried to intervene, his voice strained as he glanced at his colleagues, their discomfort palpable. Devin, Ethan's not himself tonight. He doesn't mean, "Stop, Dad," Devin cut in, his tone unyielding. "Stop making excuses for him. Stop pretending this isn't exactly the dynamic you and Mom have fostered for years." The silence that followed was deafening, a void that swallowed the pretense of the Caldwell family's perfect image. Richard's colleagues sat frozen, their carefully curated dinner now a front row seat to a family's implosion. Eleanor's eyes darted between her sons, her composure crumbling under the weight of their words. I stood slowly, stirring my purse with deliberate calm, though my heart raced with the adrenaline of the moment. "I think it's time for us to go," I said, my voice steady but quiet, a lifeline to civility in the chaos. "Morgan, please," Eleanor began, her voice pleading, but I shook my head gently. "This isn't the time or place for this conversation," I said, my gaze sweeping the table, acknowledging the guests caught in this uncomfortable spectacle. "Your guests deserve better than to be caught in family drama." Richard's expression was a mix of gratitude and dismay, torn between appreciation for my attempt to salvage some dignity and the pain of watching his family fracture. Ethan laughed again, a hollow, broken sound that echoed with the weight of a man watching his world crumble. "Yes, run away like you always do," he taunted. "Hide in your little craftsman house with your perfect children and your important job. Pretend you're better than all of us." Devin moved toward his brothers, not with anger, but with a weary compassion that spoke of years spent navigating Ethan's storms. "You need help, Ethan," he said softly. "Go home to Melanie. She's worried about you." "Melanie," Ethan repeated, his voice suddenly small, stripped of its earlier bravado. "She's probably packing her bags as we speak, leaving me just like everything else is." The raw fear in his words pierced through his anger, revealing a man terrified of losing the pillars of his identity, his marriage, his status as the favored son, his unchallenged place in the family hierarchy. For a moment, I felt an unexpected pang of sympathy, seeing the vulnerability beneath his drunken outburst. "She's not leaving you," I said, softening my tone, letting a sliver of compassion break through my guarded exterior. "She called me earlier looking for you. She's worried, Ethan. She just wants you home." My words seemed to reach him, cutting through the haze of alcohol and resentment. His shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him as quickly as it had flared. "Go home, Ethan," I said gently. "Talk to your wife." With that, Devin and I made our exit, the tension in the room following us like a shadow. The cool night air was a balm against the suffocating heat of the dining room, and neither of us spoke until we reached the car. Devin slid into the driver's seat, exhaling heavily. "Well," he said, a wry edge to his voice, "that wasn't exactly how I imagined this dinner ending." I leaned back against the headrest, exhaustion washing over me like a tide. "Did you know about them calling me the family embarrassment?" I asked, my voice quieter than I'd intended, the weight of the phrase still lingering. Devin's hands tightened on the steering wheel, his knuckles whitening. "No, God, no, Morgan. If I'd known—" He shook his head, his jaw tight with regret. "I'm so sorry. I should have done more. Said more over the years." "It's not your fault," I said, reaching over to touch his arm, grounding myself in his warmth. "You've always supported me, always had my back. You can't control how your family sees me." "They're supposed to be your family too," he said, his voice heavy with guilt and frustration. What a mess. Poor Melanie, though. I never thought I'd say those words, but she sounded genuinely scared on the phone. I nodded, thinking of the vulnerability in Melanie's voice when she'd called earlier, so different from the poised, untouchable woman I'd known for years. "I think there's a lot going on beneath the surface there," I said. "Ethan's clearly struggling with the shifting dynamics." Devin started the car, pulling out of his parents' circular driveway, the Seattle night quiet around us. "It was bound to happen eventually," he said. "The perfect Caldwell image has always been a facade. It just took you shaking things up to finally crack it open." "Me?" I said, surprised. I don't think— Morgan, Devin interrupted gently, his voice warm but firm. You've always been the catalyst. Your success, your confidence, your refusal to diminish yourself to make others comfortable. It challenges the whole system they've built. That's why they've kept you at arm's length. You're the variable they couldn't control. His words settled over me as we drove through the darkened streets toward home, the city lights blurring past. Had I really been a catalyst? I'd always seen myself as the outsider, tolerated, but never truly accepted into the Caldwell fold. But Devin's perspective shifted something in me, reframing my place in their world. Perhaps my existence, my unapologetic success, my refusal to conform to their narrow expectations had been threatening their carefully constructed mythology all along. When we arrived home, Jessica, our babysitter, greeted us with a smile, reporting that the kids had been perfect angels, tucked into bed hours ago. After she left, Devin and I sat at the kitchen table, the quiet of our home a stark contrast to the chaos of the evening. I should check on Melanie, I said, pulling out my phone. Let her know Ethan's on his way home, hopefully. I sent a quick text. Ethan showed up at the dinner. We suggested he go home to you. Is everything okay? The response came almost immediately. He just walked in. Thank you, Morgan. I owe you one. Devin watched me, a thoughtful expression on his face. You know what's strange? A week ago, I couldn't have imagined you texting Melanie about anything, let alone helping her with a personal crisis. A week ago, she was still the perfect Caldwell daughter-in-law, and I was still the family embarrassment, I said with a wry smile. Amazing how quickly things can change. Do you think it's real? This change in her? Devin asked, his brow furrowed. I considered the question, thinking of Melanie's visit to my office, the vulnerability in her voice tonight. I think it's complicated, I said. People don't transform overnight. But seeing me in that conference room in my professional element, I think it forced her to confront some assumptions she'd been making, and maybe some dissatisfactions in her own life too. Devin nodded slowly. And my parents, all that sudden interest in your career, in the kids' preferences, equally complicated. I sighed. Part of it is opportunistic, no doubt. Richard sees a way to leverage my connection for his own professional network. But at dinner, the way he talked about your engineering award, that seemed genuine. It did, didn't it? A small smile tugged at Devin's lips. First time in 20 years he's acknowledged my career without adding, of course, law would have been more suitable. My phone buzzed with another text from Melanie. Ethan's asleep now. Things are still tense, but he's home safe. Thank you for how you handled things tonight. He told me what happened at dinner. I showed the message to Devin, who raised an eyebrow. The new grateful Melanie is going to take some getting used to. I typed a quick reply, glad he's home safe, and set my phone down. We should check on the kids, I said. Together we tiptoed upstairs, peering into Tyler's room, where he lay sprawled across his bed, one arm wrapped around his favorite stuffed dragon. In Zoe's room, we found her sleeping peacefully, her sketchbook open beside her pillow, a half-finished drawing of a fantastical creature illuminated by the soft glow of her nightlight. Standing in the doorway of our daughter's room, Devin slipped his arm around my waist, his touch a quiet anchor. We did good, didn't we, he said. He said, his voice soft with pride, despite all the Caldwell drama. I leaned against him, drawing comfort from his steady presence. We did. They're amazing kids, because they have an amazing father who's never made them feel like they need to be something they're not. Devin kissed the top of my head, his voice thick with emotion. And an amazing mother who's shown me what it looks like to value yourself, even when others don't. Thank you, Morgan, for standing your ground all these years. His words brought unexpected tears to my eyes, a release of the tension I'd carried through the evening. We've done it together, I said, created our own family culture outside the Caldwell shadow. As we returned downstairs, my phone rang, Eleanor's number flashing on the screen. Devin and I exchanged a glance. You don't have to answer that, he said, his tone neutral, but supportive. I hesitated, then picked up. Hello, Eleanor, I said, my voice calm but guarded. Morgan, she said, her voice strained, as if the weight of the evening had aged her. We wanted to apologize for what happened tonight. Ethan was completely out of line. Yes, he was, I said. letting the truth sit between us. A beat of silence then. The things he said about you being the family embarrassment. I want you to know Richard and I have never thought of you that way. I closed my eyes, gathering patience, the years of subtle slights flashing through my mind. Eleanor, you may not have used those words, but your actions have often told the same story. The way you've treated my career, my children, my choices, they've sent a clear message about where I stand in the family hierarchy. Another silence, longer this time. I suppose we deserve that, she said finally, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. I won't make excuses, but I want you to know we're truly sorry. Not just for tonight, but for the potet. Part of me wanted to believe her, to trust that tonight's disaster had awakened her to the damage done by years of exclusion. But another part, the one that had survived countless professional and personal battles, remained cautious. I appreciate that, Eleanor, I said. But an apology is just the beginning. Real change takes time and consistent effort. I understand, she said quietly. Will you at least give us the chance to try? For the children's sake, if nothing else? I looked at Devin, who gave a small nod, his expression one of quiet support. We can try, I said finally, but it needs to be different this time. Real engagement with Zoe and Tyler. Real respect for Devin's career choices and mine. No more hints that we're somehow less valuable. Yes, of course, Eleanor agreed quickly, perhaps too quickly. We'll do better, Morgan. I promise. After we hung up, Devin raised an eyebrow. You think she means it? I think she wants to mean it, I said, setting the phone down with a sigh. Whether she can change patterns that have been in place for decades, that remains to be seen. Devin nodded, his expression thoughtful. And us? Where do we go from here? I considered the question, the evening's events still vivid in my mind. Ethan's outburst, Melanie's vulnerability, Richard and Eleanor's tentative steps toward reconciliation. All sparked by the simple fact of my professional identity finally being seen. We keep standing in our truth, I said. We maintain our boundaries, and we give them the opportunity to meet us where we are, not where they want us to be. Later that night, as Devin slept beside me, I lay awake, replaying the past week. My mind kept returning to the moment in the conference room when Melanie had seen me in my element, the shock in her eyes as she recalibrated everything she thought she knew about me. That moment had shifted something fundamental, not just for her or the Caldwells, but for me. After years of compartmentalizing my life, thriving professionally while shrinking in family spaces, I had finally integrated those worlds. I no longer needed to make myself smaller to fit the Caldwell narrative. I could be who I was, executive director, mother, wife, unapologetically. Whether they chose to accept that version of me was their choice, not my burden. With that thought, I drifted toward sleep, feeling a quiet liberation. Whatever came next, reconciliation or further conflict, I would face it as my whole authentic self. The family embarrassment had become the family catalyst, and there was no turning back. The pile of reports on Morgan Taylor's desk loomed like a physical manifestation of the weekend's emotional upheaval, each folder a reminder of the turmoil she was trying to suppress. When Olivia, her colleague, appeared in the doorway, her perceptive gaze caught the tension Morgan was struggling to mask. Everything all right, Morgan? Olivia's voice carried a blend of concern and professional restraint, probing gently but not invasively. Morgan forced a faint smile, her words deliberately vague. Just a whirlwind weekend. You know how it is. Inside, her mind was a storm, replaying the raw confrontations, the exposed vulnerabilities, and the baggial promises of change from Friday's Caldwell family dinner. To dodge further scrutiny, she shifted gears. Has Diana finalized the PR manager decision yet? Olivia's eyebrow quirked, a silent nod to Morgan's obvious pivot, but she played along. Thompson's holding the last interviews today. Rumor has it your sister-in-law's still a contender. The comment was casual but pointed, testing Morgan's reaction. At Vertex, news spread like wildfire, and Melanie Caldwell's candidacy was no exception. Morgan kept her expression impassive, a practiced neutrality born of years navigating corporate politics. Good to hear, She's got the credentials for it, she replied, her voice steady, though her heart tugged with the weight of familial complexities. Olivia lingered, her curiosity thinly veiled. And it's not strange at all? Her working here? With you? The question was light but loaded, probing the fragile boundary between Morgan's professional sanctuary and her tangled personal life. Morgan paused, giving the question more weight than Olivia might have anticipated. Just a week ago, the idea of Melanie at Vertex would have been a nightmare. Two worlds colliding in a chaos of awkward encounters and whispered office gossip. The mere thought would have tightened her chest, conjuring images of strained hallway exchanges or pointed looks during meetings. But after Friday's dinner, where Ethan's insecurities erupted and Melanie revealed a surprising fragility, the idea felt less like a disaster waiting to happen. It was as if the fault lines in their relationship had shifted, revealing a possibility for something new, though Morgan couldn't yet define what. It might have been weird before, she admitted, her voice quieter, introspective. But things are changing, evolving maybe. Before Olivia could press further, Marcus, the CEO, appeared at the door, his usual warmth replaced by a rare gravity that sent a jolt of unease through Morgan. "Morgan, can we talk in my office for a minute?" She nodded, rising to follow him, her mind already sifting through potential crises that might warrant his direct attention. As they walked down the hall, she mentally reviewed her projects, searching for any misstep. Stepping into Marcus's office, she was startled to find Diana, the HR director, already there, her face equally solemn. Morgan's apprehension deepened. "Close the door, please," Marcus said, motioning to a chair. Morgan sat, steeling herself. "We've got a situation I need to discuss with you directly." His words sparked a flicker of alarm. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice calm despite the sudden tightness in her chest. Marcus and Diana shared a brief glance, a wordless exchange that only heightened her unease. Then Marcus spoke, his tone carefully even. "I received a call this morning from Richard Caldwell." Morgan's stomach plummeted. Her father-in-law, a man whose influence cast a long shadow over the Caldwell family, a patriarch who wielded power with the ease of someone accustomed to getting his way. "Yes, he mentioned your connection," Marcus continued, his expression unreadable. "He was inquiring about employment opportunities for his daughter-in-law, Melanie Caldwell. Specifically, he wanted to know if he could facilitate her candidacy for the PR manager position." A wave of mortification crashed over Morgan, hot and overwhelming. After Friday's raw, painful dinner, Ethan's outburst, Eleanor's tearful apology, the fragile biseaux of a new beginning, Richard was still pulling strings, still operating from the same playbook of control and privilege. Morgan closed her eyes briefly, grappling with the sting of betrayal. "Marcus, I had no idea he'd do this. I'm so sorry," she said, her voice taut with embarrassment. Marcus dismissed her apology with a wave, his tone firm but kind. "I know, Morgan, that's not why you're here. I wanted to explain how I handled it, considering the family dynamics involved." Diana leaned forward, her voice steady but deliberate. "We felt transparency was critical, especially since you have already disclosed your relationship with Melanie." Morgan nodded, grateful for their openness but still reeling from Richard's gall. "What did you tell him?" she asked, bracing herself. Marcus's eyes glinted with a hint of steel. "I laid out our hiring policies clearly. Candidates are evaluated solely on their qualifications and interview performance. Any attempt to sway the process through personal connections would actually harm the candidate's chances." Morgan winced, picturing Richard's reaction. The man was unaccustomed to refusal, especially from someone outside his sphere of influence. Marcus's lips twitched into a faint smile. He seemed taken aback. Apparently, in his legal world, these professional courtesies are standard. Morgan let out a quiet, bitter laugh, her mind flashing to the countless doors Richard's influence had opened for Ethan, doors Devon had deliberately sidestepped. "I'm sure they are," she murmured, thinking of the ways the Caldwell name had shaped their family's path, often at a cost. Diana interjected, her voice pulling Morgan back. "Here's the key point, Morgan. Thompson completed the final interviews this morning. Before Richard's call, he selected Melanie for the role, based entirely on her qualifications." The words hit Morgan like a revelation. Richard's meddling hadn't just been inappropriate, it had been redundant. Melanie had earned the position on her own merit. Exactly, Marcus said, nodding. And now we need to decide. Given Richard's interference, do we reconsider Thompson's choice, or do we proceed, knowing the selection was independent? The question's weight settled heavily on Morgan. As an executive who'd flagged a potential conflict of interest, her perspective would carry significant influence. She took a moment to center herself, striving to untangle her personal feelings from her professional duty. "Who made the final hiring decision?" she asked carefully. "Thompson, with my oversight," Diana replied. "You were intentionally excluded, as we agreed." Morgan nodded, processing. "And you're both certain Melanie was chosen purely on merit?" "Without question," Diana said firmly. "Her political PR experience aligns perfectly with Thompson's upcoming projects. She was the strongest candidate by far." Morgan exhaled, balancing the messy Caldwell family dynamics against her responsibility to Vertex. Punishing Melanie for Richard's actions felt unjust, especially if she was unaware of Ida's call. "Then we should move forward with the hire," she said decisively. "It's not fair to penalize Melanie for Richard's overstep, particularly when she likely didn't know." Marcus studied her, his gaze probing. "You're certain? This won't complicate things for you personally?" His concern was genuine, a reflection of the respect he had always shown for the line between work and life. Morgan gave a small, wry smile. "Complications are already there, but they're not Vertex's burden. Melanie deserves to be judged for her work, not her family or Richard's actions." Marcus nodded, satisfied. "That's my thinking too. Diana will extend the offer today." As Morgan left the office, her mind buzzed with the implications of Melanie at Vertex. Should she call Devin now, or wait until they were face-to-face to unpack this development? Before she could decide, her phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor, her mother-in-law. "Morgan, could we have lunch this week? Just us? I'd like to talk about a few things." The message caught Morgan off guard. In 3 years, Eleanor had never suggested a private meeting. Their interactions were always cushioned by family events, with Devin or the kids as a buffer. After a moment, Morgan replied, "Thursday works. 1:00 p.m. If Richard was still meddling, she needed to gauge the Caldwell's true intentions. Eleanor responded quickly. "Perfect. There's a lovely bistro near your office, Le Jardin. Would that work?" The fact that she knew a restaurant near Morgan's workplace, that she'd considered her convenience, felt like a subtle but meaningful shift. "That works. See you Thursday," Morgan wrote, setting her phone down just as Olivia's voice came through the intercom. "Thompson online too." Morgan picked up, expecting a question about the Jong contract. "Morgan Taylor," she said. Thompson's vibrant voice burst through, brimming with his usual energy. "Morgan, glad I caught you. Wanted to tell you myself, we've chosen Melanie Caldwell for the PR manager role. Diana mentioned she's your sister-in-law." Morgan leaned back, a mix of relief and trepidation settling in. "She is. Thanks for the direct heads up." "I also want to clarify," Thompson added, his tone shifting to serious professionalism. "Her connection to you played no part in the decision. She was the top candidate, period. Her political PR background is exactly what we need for next quarter's advocacy campaigns." Morgan smiled, trusting Thompson's judgment implicitly. Despite his exuberance, he was one of Vertex's sharpest leaders. "I trust you, Thompson. When does she start?" 2 weeks. I'll coordinate with HR." After hanging up, Morgan stared at the ceiling, grappling with the reality of Melanie joining Vertex. Even with their recent personal progress, her presence at work would blur lines Morgan had fought to keep clear. Could Melanie respect the boundaries between their professional and family roles? Would Ethan's insecurities, so vividly exposed at dinner, seep into the workplace? And most critically, was Richard's call a one-time misstep, or a sign that the Caldwell's promises of change were hollow? Thursday arrived without answers. The week had been consumed with tying up the Jong contract and preparing for a board presentation, leaving little time for family concerns. Morgan hadn't told Melanie about Richard's call, partly to see if she'd mention it, and partly because she wasn't sure it was her place. Le Jardin was lively at 1:00 p.m., filled with professionals and well-dressed women enjoying leisurely lunches. Eleanor was already at a secluded corner table, shielded by a trellis with artificial ivy, private enough for a candid talk. She stood as Morgan approached, offering a tentative embrace that felt slightly awkward. "Morgan, thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would after Friday night. Morgan sat, noting the faint exhaustion in Eleanor's eyes, despite her elegant cashmere sweater and pearls. I thought it could be good to talk directly, Morgan said, her tone neutral. A server took their drink orders, sparkling water for Morgan, white wine for Eleanor. When he left, Eleanor folded her hands, her rings catching the light. I want to apologize again for Friday night, she began, her voice steady but heavy with regret. Ethan's behavior was unacceptable. It was, Morgan agreed, firm but not harsh. But it was also revealing. It showed the pressures and expectations that have been building in your family for years. The server returned with their drinks and took their orders. A niçoise salad for Morgan, coq au vin for Eleanor. Alone again, Morgan continued. Ethan's outburst didn't happen in a vacuum, Eleanor. It's part of a larger dynamic. Eleanor sipped her wine, discomfort flickering across her face. No, I suppose it didn't. After a pause, she added, Ethan and Melanie are seeing a counselor. Did you know? Morgan nodded. Melanie mentioned they were going to try. Eleanor seemed to steel herself, her voice softer. Richard and I have been reflecting since Friday about how we've handled things with Ethan, Devin, you, Melanie, and the grandchildren. Morgan stayed silent, giving Eleanor room to continue. Her next words were unexpected. We haven't been fair to you, Morgan. Her voice cracked with rare vulnerability, piercing the Caldwell polish. Or to Devin, or Zoe and Tyler. We've played favorites, valued certain achievements over others, created a hierarchy that was wrong. The confession stunned Morgan. She had expected deflections, not this raw accountability. Why now? She asked quietly. Is it just because you learned about my role at Vertex? Because my career suddenly matters to you? Eleanor flinched but held Morgan's gaze. I deserve that. Yes, discovering your executive position was a wake-up call. It showed us how little we valued your work, your achievements. She hesitated, her fingers tracing her wine glass. But it's more than that. Seeing Ethan so angry, so afraid of losing his place as the golden child, it forced us to confront what we've fostered in our family. Their food arrived, offering a brief pause to gather their thoughts. They thanked the server, arranged their napkins, and resumed. Ethan told us about Melanie's job offer at Vertex, Eleanor said warmly. Congratulations to her. It's a wonderful opportunity. Morgan took a bite of her salad, choosing her words. It is. She earned it based on her qualifications, which are substantial. Eleanor nodded, cutting a precise piece of chicken. Richard thought he could help things along. I told him it was inappropriate, but you know how he is. The admission Morgan had been waiting for, not a question, but a quiet confession. Morgan set down her fork, meeting Eleanor's eyes. Marcus told me about Richard's call. It wasn't necessary. Melanie had already secured the position on her own. Eleanor's face fell, genuine dismay in her eyes. Oh dear, I was afraid of that. Richard was so sure he was helping. Morgan leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. That's been the problem, hasn't it? Assuming your help is always needed, always wanted, without asking what's truly helpful. Eleanor's gaze dropped, her silence heavy. I never saw it that way, she said softly. We thought we were caring for the family, ensuring everyone had what they needed. But on your terms, Morgan pointed out, kind but unflinching. Based on your vision of success, not ours. A long silence followed, Eleanor absorbing the perspective. When she looked up, her expression was raw. I don't think I know how to do things differently, she admitted quietly. This is how Richard and I have always operated, how we were raised. The honesty touched Morgan unexpectedly. For the first time, she saw Eleanor as a woman shaped by her own past, perpetuating patterns she hadn't fully examined. Change is possible, Morgan said, softening, but it takes effort and intention. It means asking questions, listening instead of directing. Eleanor nodded slowly, understanding dawning. Like asking Zoe and Tyler what desserts they love, instead of assuming they'd want what Liam and Sophia like. Exactly, Morgan said, a small smile emerging. Or asking Devin about his engineering projects with genuine interest. Or asking me about my work at Vertex. Eleanor met her gaze, earnest. I'd like to do that now if you are willing. Not because of the Jong contract, but because it matters to you. Because it's part of you. The request felt like a bridge, a tentative step toward connection. Over the rest of their lunch, Morgan shared her role at Vertex, the challenges of leading her team, the pride in their successes, the projects that fueled her passion. Eleanor listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions without judgment or comparison to Ethan's career. It was their most authentic conversation ever. As they shared a chocolate souffle, Eleanor's insistence, Morgan felt cautious optimism. Then Eleanor broached another topic, her tone careful. "Morgan, there's something else I'd like to discuss. Something personal." Morgan set down her espresso, curious. "What is it?" Eleanor hesitated, choosing her words. "Richard and I have been thinking about our relationship with Zoe and Tyler, about how we've fallen short as grandparents. We'd like to change that, if you and Devin are open to it." The lunch with Eleanor Caldwell unfolded in a way I hadn't anticipated, stirring emotions I hadn't expected to feel. As we sat across from each other in the quiet hum of the restaurant, Eleanor's usual polished demeanor seemed softened, her eyes carrying a weight of introspection that caught me off guard. When she spoke, her voice was steady, but laced with a vulnerability I'd never heard before. She wanted to spend more time with Zoe and Tyler, not in the usual flurry of grand Caldwell family gatherings, where Liam and Sophia, Ethan's children, often stole the spotlight, but in moments carved out just for them. Her suggestion to take Zoe to the art museum, a place my daughter had been dreaming about for months, and Tyler to the science center, where his curiosity about the world could run wild, felt like a revelation. It wasn't just the thoughtfulness of the idea, it was the way it acknowledged Zoe and Tyler as individuals, each with their own passions, rather than as part of the collective Caldwell brood. For a moment, I was speechless, my fork hovering over my salad. The Caldwells had always favored group activities, lavish, orchestrated events where the focus was on appearances, not connection. Eleanor's proposal was a departure, a quiet rebellion against the family's usual script. "That would be wonderful, Eleanor," I finally managed, my voice catching slightly. "I know they'd love that." The relief that washed over her face was palpable, her shoulders relaxing as if she'd been bracing for rejection. "Good," she said softly, almost to herself. "We want to do better, Morgan. We want to be the grandparents they deserve." Her words hung in the air, heavy with sincerity, and for the first time I saw not just the formidable matriarch, but a woman grappling with her own shortcomings, yearning to mend what had been broken. As we settled the bill, Eleanor insisted on paying, a gesture that felt more like an olive branch than a power move. She placed a gentle hand on my arm. "There's one more thing," she said, her tone shifting to something warmer, more personal. "Richard mentioned the Jong contract will be finalized next week. We'd like to host a celebration dinner, not for our friends or colleagues, but just for family, to honor your achievement properly." My mind flashed to past Caldwell celebrations, stiff affairs filled with important guests and carefully curated menus, designed more to showcase the family's status than to celebrate the occasion. "Just family?" I asked, skepticism creeping into my voice. Eleanor nodded, her eyes steady. "Just us, you, Devin, the children, Ethan, and Melanie, if they're up for it after everything." The everything she referred to was the recent turmoil in Ethan and Melanie's marriage, a topic we'd all tiptoed around since Friday night's explosive family dinner. The idea of a true family dinner, one focused on my work rather than the Caldwell image, felt almost too good to be true. I wanted to believe in this new Eleanor, this grandmother who saw Zoe's love for art, this mother-in-law who seemed to genuinely care about my career. "I'll talk to Devin," I promised, my voice softer than I intended. "But it sounds lovely." As we parted outside the restaurant, Eleanor surprised me with a hug. It wasn't the awkward, perfunctory embrace of years past. It was warmer, more sincere, as if she were trying to convey something words couldn't capture. "Thank you for giving us another chance, Morgan," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I know we don't deserve it after how we've treated you." I paused, searching her face, and found myself saying, "Everyone deserves a chance to change, Eleanor." To my surprise, I meant it. Driving back to Vertex, my mind churned with the unexpected warmth of the lunch. Eleanor's sincerity had disarmed me. I'd braced myself for polite deflections or half-hearted apologies, not this apparent desire for genuine transformation. Could it be that Friday night's confrontation, raw, messy, and long overdue, had actually shifted something in the Caldwell family? The question lingered as I pulled into the parking lot, only to be replaced by a new concern when I found Diana waiting in my office, her expression clouded with worry. "Everything okay?" I asked, setting my bag down. "We have a situation with the PR manager position," she said bluntly. "Melanie Caldwell just called to decline our offer." The words hit like a cold splash of water. "Decline?" I echoed, stunned. Melanie had been thrilled about the opportunity, her excitement palpable during our last conversation. Diana nodded, her confusion mirroring my own. She was upset, said it wasn't the right time, that she needed to focus on her family. But it felt constrained, like she was choosing her words carefully. A knot of suspicion tightened in my chest. Had someone intervened? Ethan, perhaps, still reeling from Friday's drama? Or, despite her lunch revelations, could Eleanor or Richard have played a role? I thanked Diana and reached for my phone, finding no messages from Melanie. I sent a quick text. "Diana just told me you declined the PR position. Is everything okay?" Minutes ticked by with no reply. I called her number, only to be met with voicemail. By the time I left the office that evening, Melanie still hadn't responded. The contrast between Eleanor's heartfelt promises and Melanie's sudden withdrawal gnawed at me, creating a dissonance I couldn't shake. Had Ethan pressured her? Or had the Caldwell's newfound sincerity been a facade? When I arrived home, the sight of Devin helping Zoe with her homework at the kitchen table, Tyler coloring nearby, grounded me. The simple, warm chaos of our family life, fractions, crayons and all, felt like a balm after the day's uncertainties. "Hey you," Devin greeted, his smile easing the tension in my chest. "How was lunch with Mom?" "Surprisingly good," I admitted, dropping kisses on his head, then Zoe's and Tyler's. "We'll talk after the kids are in bed." Zoe groaned dramatically about fractions, and I slid into the familiar rhythm of our evening: homework, dinner, bath time, and stories. Later, as Devin and I settled on the couch with glasses of wine, I recounted the lunch, Eleanor's thoughtful suggestions for Zoe and Tyler, her apology, the family dinner proposal. Devin listened, his expression a mix of surprise and cautious hope. "That's more specific than I'd expect from Mom," he said, promising even. But then I shared Melanie's withdrawal from the burrito offer and her silence since. Devin's brow furrowed. "That doesn't add up. She was so excited about having something of her own." "Exactly," I said. "It feels like someone pressured her." "Ethan, maybe?" Devin's jaw tightened. He was unhinged on Friday. "Maybe he's still threatened by your influence on her." I nodded, recalling Melanie's text about their counseling. "Your mom mentioned they're seeing a counselor, which could be stirring things up." Devin sighed. "Therapy can do that. Bring everything to the surface before it gets better." Before I could respond, my phone rang. Melanie's name flashed on the screen. I exchanged a glance with Devin and answered. "Melanie, is everything okay?" Her voice was hushed, almost secretive. "No, I can't talk now. Can we meet tomorrow? Coffee before work?" We agreed on Starbucks at 7:30 and she added, "Come alone, please." The call ended abruptly, leaving me staring at the phone. "She sounds stressed," I told Devin. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. "I was hoping things were improving after the counseling news. This feels like more drama." As we talked, I admitted something that surprised even me. I cared about Melanie. A week ago, she'd been the last person I'd have felt invested in, but seeing her vulnerability, her struggle to carve out her own identity, had shifted my perspective. "She's not just the perfect Caldwell daughter-in-law anymore," I said. "She's someone shaped by the same family pressures you faced, just differently." Devin nodded, a wry smile tugging at his lips. The golden child and the black sheep, two sides of the same coin. The next morning, I arrived at Starbucks early, securing a corner table and sipping my latte as I watched the door. My mind raced with questions. Why had Melanie declined the job? What had changed? At exactly 7:30, she walked in and I barely recognized her. Gone was the polished, designer-clad sister-in-law. Her hair was pulled back simply, her face bare of makeup, and shadows under her eyes spoke of sleepless nights. "Thanks for meeting me," she said, sliding into the chair across from me. I pushed a latte toward her, remembering her order from our last coffee shop talk. "I was concerned," I said. Diana told me you declined the PR position. What happened? Melanie's hands wrapped around the cup, her knuckles whitening. Ethan happened. She took a shaky breath. After Friday's disaster, things were actually improving. Counseling was helping. He seemed to be processing everything. Her expression darkened. Then yesterday, Richard called Ethan, said he'd put in a good word for me at Vertex, talked to Marcus directly, presented it as some grand gesture. My stomach sank. Ethan was furious, she continued, her voice bitter. Not at Richard, but at me. Accused me of using family connections, undermining the Caldwell name. The irony is, his entire career is built on Richard's influence. But you didn't ask Richard to call, I pointed out. You earned that position. She nodded, her gaze distant. Ethan said I had to choose, my marriage or the job. The ultimatum hung between us, heavy and cruel. I've spent 7 years being the perfect Caldwell wife, she said softly. I don't know who I am outside that. The thought of losing it, starting over alone, terrifies me. Her vulnerability echoed my own past fears, the weight of defining yourself through others' expectations. But I've been thinking, she continued, her voice steadier, about what it means that I let Ethan decide this, about what I'm teaching Liam and Sophia by backing down. Her eyes met mine, a spark of resolve beneath the exhaustion. Is it too late? Could I still accept the position if it's not filled? The question stunned me. Technically, yes, I said. Diana hasn't moved to the next candidate, but what about Ethan? Something fierce flickered in her expression. I love him, but I'm done letting the Caldwell men dictate my choices. If he loves me, he'll support my career like Devin supports yours. If not, she swallowed hard. Maybe our marriage isn't what I thought. Her courage was breathtaking, a woman stepping out from the shadow of the Caldwell legacy. What about Richard and Eleanor? I asked. Melanie's lips curved into a faint smile. Eleanor called me yesterday after I declined the job, asked why I had turned it down. I told her the truth about Ethan, about feeling trapped. She said a marriage built on control isn't healthy, that she and Richard had made mistakes with their sons, fostering competition instead of support. She didn't want that for us. I leaned back, processing this. Eleanor's insight was more than I had expected, a sign of real growth. If you want the job, I'll talk to Diana, I offered. Relief flooded Melanie's face. Thank you, Morgan. I know I haven't earned this. Everyone deserves a chance to redefine themselves, I said, echoing my words to Eleanor. As we prepared to leave, Melanie hesitated. Eleanor mentioned a family dinner for your Jong contract. Will you and Devin be there? We're considering it, I said. She seemed genuine about celebrating the achievement. Melanie's expression turned resolute. I'd like to be there too, with or without Ethan, to support you publicly, in front of the family. Her words carried the weight of a vow, a break from the Caldwell unity that had once defined her. As we parted, I felt a shift within myself. I was no longer the outsider begging for the Caldwell's approval. I was Morgan Taylor, standing in my own power, ready to navigate whatever came next in this tangled family dynamic. And for the first time, I felt truly prepared to face it on my own terms. The Caldwell family's carefully constructed image had always felt like an impenetrable fortress, one I'd spent years chipping away at, often without realizing it. As Melanie and I went our separate ways that day, she to face the uncertainties waiting for her at home, and I to grapple with the professional ripple effects of her rekindled interest in the PR position, I couldn't shake the sense of awe that washed over me. In just 7 days, my perception of my sister-in-law had undergone a profound shift. The Melanie I once saw as flawless, aloof, and quietly critical now stood before me as a woman in the midst of a quiet revolution. She was finding her voice, carving out her boundaries, and redefining what mattered most to her. Riding the elevator to my office, I marveled at how her transformation mirrored something larger, a crack in the Caldwell family's polished facade, one I'd unwittingly helped widen. Back at the office, I sat down with Diana to discuss Melanie's changed circumstances. My heart raced as I explained the situation, unsure how she'd react to this unexpected turn. To my relief, Diana listened with an open mind, her expression calm but attentive. She agreed to reach out to Melanie about the PR position, her nod conveying a quiet confidence in the process. When I hesitantly asked whether Richard's inappropriate call to Thompson had swayed the decision-making, Diana's response was immediate, her head shaking with conviction. Marcus was crystal clear with Thompson, she said, her voice firm. The selection had to be based purely on qualifications. No exceptions. If anything, Richard's meddling had only intensified the scrutiny on Melanie's candidacy, yet Melanie had risen to the occasion, her skills and poise shining through undeniably. By lunchtime, the matter was settled. Melanie had formally accepted the position and would start in 2 weeks, exactly as planned. A wave of relief coursed through me, tinged with pride for her triumph. I pulled out my phone and texted Devin with the update, my fingers lingering over the screen as I added, "Something big is shifting in your family. Melanie's standing up to Ethan and Eleanor's encouraging her. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it." My words felt inadequate to capture the weight of what I'd witnessed, but I sent them anyway, hoping Devin would sense the undercurrent of change. His reply came almost instantly. "Miracles do happen, cautiously optimistic, but keeping expectations low. Love you." His measured tone mirrored my own guarded hope, a reflex born from years of navigating the Caldwell family's disappointments. We'd both learned to shield ourselves from expecting too much, too soon. Yet as the day unfolded, I found myself genuinely excited for Eleanor's celebration dinner on Saturday, curious to see how these shifting dynamics would manifest in person. The dinner, deliberately scheduled for Saturday evening to accommodate the children's routines, was a small but telling sign of Eleanor's evolving priorities. When Devin, the kids, and I arrived at the Caldwell's lakefront home, the atmosphere felt different, lighter, less suffocating than past gatherings. Gone was the formal dining room with its imposing table settings and rigid etiquette. Instead, Eleanor had chosen the garden room, its expansive windows framing the serene lake beyond. The casual setting felt like a quiet rebellion against the family's usual stiffness, and it set my heart at ease in a way I hadn't expected. As we stepped inside, Zoe, my daughter, bounded forward with an eagerness that caught me off guard. "Grandma," she called, clutching her sketchbook, her usual wariness around Eleanor replaced by a spark of excitement. "I brought my new sketches to show you." Eleanor, to my astonishment, knelt down to Zoe's level, a gesture so unlike her former reserved demeanor that it felt like a small miracle. Her face lit up with genuine warmth as she took the sketchbook, her voice soft and inviting. "I can't wait to see them, sweetheart. And I've been thinking about our art museum trip. There's an exhibition of women painters I think you'll love." The exchange was simple, yet it brought an unexpected lump to my throat. This was the connection I'd always dreamed of for my children, grandparents who saw them for who they were, not as extensions of family expectations. I blinked back tears, overwhelmed by the quiet beauty of the moment. Richard emerged from his study, his presence commanding but softened by an unfamiliar sincerity. He greeted Devin with a handshake that morphed into an awkward yet heartfelt hug, a gesture that spoke volumes about his effort to bridge the distance between them. "Son, good to see you," he said, his voice carrying a warmth I hadn't heard before. Then he turned to Tyler, who was half hidden behind Devin's legs, his shy gaze fixed on the floor. "And there's my rocket scientist," Richard said, his tone light but genuine. "Your grandmother tells me you've been building model rockets with your dad." Tyler peeked out, his curiosity piqued. "Yeah, we made one that went super high," he said cautiously, his voice barely above a whisper. Richard's eyes brightened. "I'd love to see that sometime. Maybe we could launch one together at the Science Center next weekend." The offer felt authentic, not like the perfunctory interest he'd shown in the past, and I saw Tyler's shoulders relax, a tentative smile breaking through. As the evening unfolded, these small moments of connection wove themselves into the fabric of the night. The conversation flowed effortlessly, touching on everyone's interest rather than orbiting around Richard's work or Ethan's achievements, as it so often had. When the topic of the John contract came up, Eleanor raised her glass in a toast that felt heartfelt, not staged. "To Morgan," she said, her voice steady and warm, "whose talent and dedication have brought such incredible opportunities to her company. We're proud of you, dear." The words hit me like a wave, carrying a weight I hadn't realized I had been waiting to hear. For 3 years, I'd longed for this, not just recognition, but genuine pride in who I was and what I'd accomplished. Under the table, Devin squeezed my hand, his eyes mirroring my own mix of emotion and cautious hope. Melanie arrived about an hour into the evening alone, as she'd warned she might be. The air shifted subtly as she entered, Eleanor and Richard exchanging quick, concerned glances. "Ethan sends his regrets," Melanie said smoothly, accepting a glass of wine from Richard with a practiced smile. "He had a case preparation that couldn't wait." We all knew it was a polite fiction, but no one pressed her for the truth, a stark departure from the Caldwell habit of demanding explanations to preserve appearances. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, but it carried the weight of unspoken understanding. As dinner wound down and the children retreated to the living room to watch a movie, Eleanor suggested we adults take our coffee to the terrace. The evening light cast a soft glow over the lake, and the gentle lapping of water provided a soothing backdrop as the conversation turned to the changes rippling through the family. Eleanor's voice was tentative, a rare vulnerability in her usually composed demeanor. "Richard and I have been reflecting a lot," she began, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup, "about the patterns we've built over the years, the expectations we placed on everyone, the ways we've prioritized certain relationships over others." Richard nodded, his discomfort with such open conversation evident, but his effort undeniable. "We haven't been fair to either of our sons," he admitted, his voice low. "We pushed Ethan toward a path that might not have been his, and we didn't value Devon's choices because they didn't align with ours." Eleanor's gaze shifted to Melanie and me, her expression heavy with regret. "And we've been just as unfair to both of you," she said. "We expected Melanie to fit an outdated mold of what a wife should be, and we overlooked Morgan's incredible talents and achievements." The words hung in the air, simple yet profound, their honesty cutting through years of unspoken tension. Devon shifted in his chair, his jaw tight as he processed his parents' admission. "It's a start," he said after a long pause, his voice measured but firm. "But real change takes time and consistent effort. It's not just about saying the right things once." Richard's response surprised me with its humility. "We know," he said, meeting Devon's gaze. "We're asking for patience as we learn to do better." Melanie set her coffee cup down with a quiet resolve, her eyes steady. "I think we all need to be more honest moving forward," she said, her words carrying a weight that seemed directed as much at herself as at the family. "No more pretending everything's fine when it's not. No more sacrificing who we are for the sake of appearances." Eleanor reached across the table, her hand resting gently on Melanie's, a gesture of solidarity that felt entirely new. "How are things with Ethan?" Eleanor asked, her directness another break from the Caldwell tradition of sidestepping uncomfortable truths. Melanie took a deep breath, her composure faltering for a moment. "It's difficult," she admitted, her voice steady but laced with pain. "He's struggling with all these changes. In the family, in our marriage, in how he sees himself. Counseling is helping, but it's bringing up a lot of hard truths." Richard's expression softened, his voice barely above a whisper. "About the pressure we put on him," he said, "the impossible standards." Melanie nodded, her eyes distant, "and how those patterns have shaped his expectations in our marriage. He's trying, but his absence tonight is a setback." Eleanor finished her thought quietly, but not the end of the story. As the conversation wove through these raw truths and tentative hopes, I found myself observing more than contributing, my mind grappling with the strangeness of this newfound openness. The Caldwells, so long defined by their rigid traditions, were beginning to question themselves, to peel back the layers of their carefully curated image. Whether this shift would endure was uncertain, but its mere existence felt like a tectonic shift in the family's foundation. Later, as Devon and I prepared to take our sleepy children home, Eleanor pulled me aside, her voice soft but resolute. "Morgan," she began, her eyes meeting mine with an intensity that caught me off guard. "I want you to know that no matter what happens with Ethan and Melanie, no matter how well Richard and I manage to change our ways, you will never again be the family embarrassment in this house. You are brilliant, accomplished, and a wonderful mother. We were blind not to see it sooner." Her words washed over me, not because I needed her approval to know my worth, but because they marked a truth finally spoken aloud. The problem had never been me, but the narrow lens through which the Caldwells had viewed the world. "Thank you, Eleanor," I said, my voice steady despite the emotions swirling within me. "That means a lot." As we drove home, Zoe and Tyler asleep in the back seat, Devin reached for my hand across the console. So, Bembe, he said quietly, what do you think? Is this change real? I weighed the question, my mind replaying the evening's moments, Eleanor kneeling to admire Zoe's sketches, Richard's genuine interest in Tyler's rockets, the raw honesty of the terrace conversation. I think it's a beginning, I said at last, my voice measured but hopeful. Whether it lasts depends on everyone's commitment, including ours, but yes, I believe something real is happening. Devin's gaze lingered on the road, his expression thoughtful. And Melanie's newfound independence, do you think it'll stick? I considered Melanie's journey, the woman I'd glimpsed beneath the perfect facade, the strength she was beginning to wield. That's her path to walk, I said. But after spending time with her, seeing the real person she's becoming, I'm rooting for her. We fell into a comfortable silence, the city lights flickering past our windows. After a moment, Devin spoke again, his voice filled with quiet conviction. It's ironic, isn't it? At all these years, they saw you as the family embarrassment, when really you've been the one sparking something important, something healing. His words resonated deeply, a truth I hadn't fully articulated to myself. By standing firm in who I was as a professional, a mother, a woman who refused to shrink to fit others' expectations, I had unwittingly created space for others to question the Caldwell mold, for Melanie to seek fulfillment beyond her role as a wife, for Eleanor and Richard to rethink their rigid definitions of success and loyalty. Sometimes the person who doesn't fit the mold ends up reshaping it for everyone, I mused aloud. Devin squeezed my hand, his smile faint but warm in the dim light. They're lost all these years, but maybe not anymore. As we pulled into our driveway, our modest home waiting to welcome us, I felt a quiet sense of wholeness. My worth had never hinged on the Caldwell's approval, but there was something undeniably healing about being seen clearly, about relationships evolving toward authenticity and support. Whatever lay ahead, whether Ethan joined this family transformation, whether Richard and Eleanor's efforts proved lasting, whether Melanie found balance in her marriage and independence, I would face it not as an outsider craving acceptance, but as a woman grounded in her own value, leading by example. The family embarrassment had become the family catalyst, and in that role, I'd found something far more valuable than approval: the power to help reshape a family culture for the next generation.